Separating the continent of Africa and Asia from each other, the Suez Canal is one of the most economically important transit routes in the world. Thanks to its role in connecting Europe with Asia and beyond, the canal has featured prominently in major historical events. The idea of a canal in the region goes as far back as the time of the pharaohs, but those plans were largely restricted to connecting the River Nile to the Red Sea. Nevertheless, interest in a shorter naval route between Europe and Asia persisted throughout the early modern period. The route used by Europe was discovered by the Portuguese in the 15th century, which required them to go around the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa. By the 19th century, Europe's focus on imperial growth abroad meant that better naval transit was even more important than before. This is where a Frenchman named Ferdinand de Lesseps steps in. In 1854, de Lesseps gained a concession from the modernizing inclined ruler of Egypt, Said Pasha, to build a canal that would connect the Mediterranean with the Red Sea. Setting up the Suez Canal Company in 1858, construction began the next year in 1859. The canal was finished a decade later in 1869, despite strong opposition from the British, who had commercial and naval supremacy thanks in part to their control of the Cape of Good Hope route. The construction of such a large project required the labour of hundreds of thousands of workers, with thousands dying due to poor conditions and outbreaks of diseases such as cholera. The grand opening in November 1869 was a notable event which attracted world leaders to a celebration that included fireworks and banquets. A few years after the canal's opening, the Egyptian ruler Ismail Pasha was unable to pay loans he had taken out to pay for his modernizing projects. Thus, in 1875, he was forced to sell his 44% share of the Suez Canal to the British government. In time, Britain's economic imperialism would see Egypt fall under its control in 1882. The British takeover of Egypt triggered anxiety within France, seeing as French investors still controlled the majority of the shares in the company. As such, the Convention of Constantinople was organized in 1888 to set out the rules of use for the canal. The convention stated that the canal was to remain under British protection, but it would be a neutral zone. British control of the Suez Canal outlasted their official control of Egypt. In 1922, the Egyptians officially gained independence, but the British still retained control over issues relating to the military and the Suez Canal. This situation continued until the early 1950s, when under the leadership of Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt signed a treaty with Britain in 1954 that secured the withdrawal of all British troops from the Suez Canal zone. This brings us to perhaps the most famous episode of the canal's history, the Suez Crisis of 1956. In line with Nasser's assertive style, he decided to nationalize the Suez Canal, intending to use the profits gained from its revenue to fund the Aswan Dam. The British and French governments refused to accept this, resulting in what's referred to as the Suez Crisis, where Britain and France colluded with Israel to attack Egypt with the aim of regaining control of the canal and toppling Nasser in the process. Lasting for only 9 days, from October 29th to November 7th, the war brought heavy international condemnation of the British, French, and Israeli governments, even from their own allies like the USA. The conflict was resolved when the United Nations stepped in and sent in an emergency force which would maintain peacekeeping in the Suez Canal and the Sinai Peninsula. Consequently, The charismatic Nasser had achieved a political victory because Egypt's ownership of the Suez was confirmed. In place of the British and French-owned Suez Canal Company, Nasser set up the Suez Canal Authority. It should be noted that Nasser's nationalization didn't mean the British and French investors lost their money. Egypt would pay off the Suez Canal Company until 1962. The United Nations Emergency Force would remain in the Suez Canal until May 1967, when Nasser asked them to leave. A few weeks later, the Israelis initiated and won a stunning victory in the Six-Day War. As a result, they took control of all of the Sinai Peninsula and the eastern bank of the Suez Canal, where they decided to build a series of fortifications. After the war, Nasser blockaded the canal and declared that it remained closed to all shipping. This situation remained in place until 1975. Remarkably, a group of 15 ships nicknamed the Yellow Fleet were trapped in the canal for the entirety of the 8 years. Because of the Six-Day War and the subsequent skirmish-focused War of Attrition, and then the Yom Kippur War of 1973, the Suez Canal was badly impacted. So in 1974, the US led an operation to clear the canal of mines and wreckage so that it could once again become open for use. Since its reopening in 1975, the canal has not seen any more fighting. In 2014, the Egyptian government announced that they were embarking on a project they referred to as the New Suez Canal, where they would create a second shipping lane as well as widening and deepening the existing waterway. The project was completed a year later. As usual, I want to thank my patrons for their generous support, especially my newest patron Bilal. If you want to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description to this video. Until next time, peace!